Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Gabriel Allen Cummings.
And I'm Sonika Garcia, and this is Breaking the Code,
a podcast series by the Havas Medical Anthropology team. We're here to take the BS out of behavioral science by illuminating the why behind the what of behaviors, rituals, and symbols that people take for granted. We hope to arm you, our listeners, with the tools you need to make sense of behavioral science and help you apply it to your work as communication extraordinaires. So welcome back, everyone. This is episode 52, I believe, of Breaking the Code. It's a bit of a weird one, so we'll address the elephant in the room right at the start. We are talking about New Year's resolutions in February, but we do feel like it's an interesting topic to bring up at any time of the year. Really, where this came up was we're thinking about how people set goals. And that's one of the things we were kind of going into the New Year's with, kind of thinking about like, what are people's different approaches to New Year's in our conversations? There's a lot of energy around like, I don't really like New Year's. There's a lot of cynicism around it. And so we really wanted to dive deeper into New Year's resolutions, what's new about it, and how are people setting trends in 2026 and going forward. So Sonika, what's your approach to New Year's resolutions? And when I say the words New Year's resolutions, what kind of comes to your mind?
Well, for me personally, and I think New Year's resolutions, we all, it's like the first thing, Happy New Year. Do you have any resolutions? But I feel like it is something so personal. I have never been a fan of New Year's resolutions. I just think it's not that I don't have goals. I think it's just the pressure of the word. We know that words hold a lot of meaning and signal things, and you have to like say the biggest resolution or make it really significant. And so it's never been something that I've done. However, this year I very much was in New Year's resolution mode. And I think and I'm not going to speak for everyone, but for me personally, just thinking about human behavior, it feels like when we're more inclined or ready or excited to set goals and have a New Year's resolution, it's because in other areas of our lives, we probably feel like equipped to do so. And like everything feels like it's settled. I mean, at least that's how I went into the year. I'm like, okay, they're not like no burning fires. I feel equipped to set a goal that hopefully I can accomplish. And I think it goes deep into like your belief in yourself. So, I mean, that's how I feel about New Year's resolutions. I think talking about it in February, it's funny because as anthropologists, when we were looking into when did New Year's resolutions start? Apparently, the ancient Babylonians would start New Year's resolutions in March. And so I don't think, we're ahead of the game. We're not, I don't know when it got pushed to January, but I think February is great. I feel like you need that time to think about it. But yeah, we just, for our listeners, we were doing some research, like who started this trend? And for me, I'm like, how dare they? But it was the ancient Babylonians. They used to do it during March to better coincide with their growing season. But the difference is that they make the resolutions to God. And so when you make a resolution to God, that level of accountability is a lot higher, right? If we're making a New Year's resolution, who are we accountable? Is it just to ourselves? I know some friend groups probably all discuss it together. I think accountability is a big part of it. I will say that I was like, okay, it's a big enough deal for me to even be saying it to myself that I'm going to have a New Year's resolution, let alone I don't shout it from the rooftops. I don't think I've even told anyone that I have them. I don't know. Maybe I'm scared of that accountability. Maybe I'm not sure. But again, I can't help but go back to New Year's resolution and belief in self in that moment. And we know how that just changes so frequently as human beings. I just think it kind of all goes back to that. That's my high level take on New Year's resolutions.
I think you brought up a lot of fascinating points there. And really, I want to circle back to the point about accountability. One thing that's sticking out in my mind is we have New Year's resolutions and we kind of set those really casually, amongst friends, amongst the New Year's Eve party. Everybody's talking about what they're going to do new in the new year. But then, at a corporate level, at our job level, it's also, feedback season. It's also goal setting season. And our bosses aren't gods in Babylonian sense, but there is that level of accountability that's there. That's saying, what did you do in 2025, for example? What are your goals for 2026? Let's sit down and really hammer out areas for you to grow. And so I think that accountability piece is one that's really interesting and one that's not always prevalent in every single kind of reset, every moment of reset that someone takes. And we'll get more into kind of the compulsion to set goals and do resets when things are getting a little shaky. But one thing we want to kind of dive into is the sentiment around New Year's resolutions. And we dove a bit into our culture scan and a deep dive. And despite empirically us having conversations, it may just be like New York snark, where people just aren't very excited about anything. So when it comes to a New Year's resolution, it's like, oh, why are you doing that? But people are actually quite positive about New Year's resolutions and the idea of setting goals. And of course, it's jokes and irony as well, is like everybody's not always in earnest setting a New Year's resolution, particularly online. But it's just very interesting to see the energy that people have towards New Year's resolutions, despite the fact that historically people just don't always keep them.
I also think it goes back to a previous point that I think we were making around modern day resolutions and how it's become to feel so like lofty, and like it has to be this, like, how I was mentioning before, these like really big like inspirational goals. I mean, I don't know, maybe some people are like, simple goals are good too, but I think when we go back to even just thinking about the word resolution, it means like the process of reducing things to a simpler form. So it's supposed to be where, like, if you're going into a New Year's resolution, it's like, okay, well, there should be like a simplification of maybe like your life and like areas you want to focus on. And it should feel achievable, because it shouldn't feel so big. It should feel like I can resolve something, right? And so I thought that was interesting. Just thinking about like modern day, how we talk about it. Another thing from a cultural perspective, and it was so interesting. There's an NPR article about New Year's resolutions. I think it came out in December, but they have an article in there about, or like a quote in there about the first time New Year's resolutions was mentioned in like a paper or whatever, and like I think it was the 1800s. And it basically said that another interesting take on resolutions, right? Yeah, we think about it as like you're starting the year and you're setting goals for like a motivation purpose, but is there a hidden sort of like undoing of all of like the quote unquote wrong that you maybe did in the later half of the year? It's like this. So we set resolutions in January. We try to keep up with them. Maybe some of them are falling to the wayside. Then by the time October, November hits, maybe we've thrown the whole thing in the garbage and we're just going completely rogue. And then it's like we're waiting until January to like set these new intentions and these new resolutions to undo what we did the later half of the year. And I was just laughing at that, because I'm like, okay, that's like kind of holding up a mirror, I feel like sometimes. And it's like, yeah, maybe that is part of it. It's not the whole part of it, but I think it's like, let me do better than I did last year, or like at least try to undo some of that. And I think that's funny. And from our culture scan perspective, I know we look a lot at like conversations and how people are talking about it. And I think it's a mixture. I mean, I'd be curious on your take, but I think it's a combination of new, like I'm going to do something new. And then it's like also, and then the other piece of that is I'm going to undo habits that I already had that are maybe not the best, right? So it's like the difference of like, I'm going to quit smoking, or I'm going to quit drinking, versus I'm going to take up a new hobby. I think there's an interesting balance between both. And just as we like deconstruct how people make resolutions. I don't know if that's fascinating, but it was to me.
No, it's fascinating to me because I like, again, diving into the culture scan, and this is more going into, the root cause of the negative sentiment around New Year's resolutions. I would say that a lot of it was around like that second part of what you were saying, where I'm going to fix something. I'm going to lose the weight. I'm going to stop smoking. It's the ending of something. I mean, we were having a conversation a while ago, and someone brought up the idea of one of their friends having a New Year's resolution. I'm going to stop eating hot foods, like foods that are smoking hot. I'm going to wait for them to cool down. It's really just the idea of like, I'm going to stop doing a thing. I'm going to fix a behavior, fix myself. I resolve to do this thing. It's really sticking out and interesting. It also goes to this conversation we were having last time around like language, particularly fail language. And that's something that's pervasive in like health communications a lot, just creating unnecessary added pressure. And that's really the root of the negative sentiment around New Year's resolutions. The idea that, we're hyper aware of mental health, but we're also feeling it in an unprecedented way. And so the idea of creating and committing to something for a year, this isn't just a young person thing. This isn't just a young people can't commit to, XYZ relationships, anything like that. This is you want me to make an additional thing that I stick to for a year? Are you serious? And that if I fail, if I don't stop doing this thing, if I end up indulging at some point in, July, just because I did it, I feel the brunt of that failure. I think what's interesting is also the balance of failure and success, where we'll feel the failure just very intensely. But if we were to make it through the year, that success is like, okay, well, the year is over. Or like, should I just keep not doing it? Like if I stop smoking for a year, I don't know if the the thing to say is, okay, let me start smoking again, which is very interesting. And I think it ultimately takes us to, and again, going back to like, maybe it is New York snark, but the attitude around goals is shifting. And one way that we're seeing it in one of the most pervasive goals is weight loss. And so we're going to do a bit of an interesting part of the show here where we're going to introduce Tiffany Tang. Tiffany is a member of our team, but she also contributes to the GLP-1 consultancy here at Avos, really just helping a lot of brands understand their place in the world of GLP-1s. And weight loss is not just the drug, it's the ripple effects that are happening from the drug. So I'll pause there. We will talk about the holiday report that came out last during the holiday season in December. So Tiffany, how are you doing? Welcome to Breaking the Code.
Hi, everyone. It's so exciting to be here. Yes, and thank you for the great intro. I am so excited to plug this report that I worked on in December. It's about holidays in the GLP-1 era and how the GLP-1s have disrupted industries like food and beverage, fitness, clothing. And we tackled this idea from the lens of the holidays, but also how they've changed how we celebrate in general. It was just this interesting topic that we decided to do a little report on. It was an opportunity to conduct these surveys with doctors and consumers to get those insights that shape what this shift means for all types of brands and society at large. It shapes how we eat, how we think about food, and you can find the link to that in the show notes. So this was an opportunity to talk to people about their experience using GLP-1s, and one of the topics I asked them about was their views around goal setting. And this is really interesting. We got this stat that 44% of GLP-1 users don't plan to make resolutions going into the new year. And as I was talking to people on GLP-1s, they were saying, they never knew what this balance felt like. So suddenly they're in control. They have a new lease on life. It's like this exciting journey for them. It's something they've never felt before. So it's this shift from people thinking in terms of dream bodies and target weights to people just being interested in losing weight and keeping it off. And we saw that 75% committed to using GLP-1s in the long term. And that means that they're just in maintenance mode. They're no longer binging and dieting in December and then focusing on looking good for the summer. They're not setting goals around their weight because it's no longer something they have to worry about. They're in control.
And thank you, Tiffany, for sharing that. I mean, I think that it's so interesting with weight loss being, again, one of the preeminent resolutions that people have. And it's, it's harmless. I'm just going to lose a few pounds, get ready for the spring and the summer and the warmer months. But even in weight loss, one of the biggest shifts that we're seeing is this idea of like, you're kind of decoupling willpower from the weight loss journey. It's no longer this idea of discipline. And we've spoken about GLP-1s a few times in the past, but to see that people are going into the holiday season without setting goals, it kind of suggests like this level of confidence that we assumed may have not been there. Going into the holiday season, it's this idea of how do I manage being around people and eating food and everything like that and fitting in. But it seems to be not even a level of defiance, but just a level of like comfort in who I am in this moment. That's really remarkable for me.
Yeah. And I think also back to like what we were saying before, I'm still thinking about just like the language that we use when we set goals. I mean, so much of what we do in our jobs as strategists and then with behavioral strategists, like, okay, we'll frame the message the right way. And are we applying that even to, and so I think in the GLP-1 space, I can imagine my hypothesis is that when you're trying to lose weight, your resolutions around it are very much from like I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to eat these certain foods. I'm not gonna indulge and whatever else you think is causing your weight gain. But then I think when you end up losing the weight, and then we know that, from the findings that we have within the consultancy, that you are able to then focus on other parts of your life, whether it's work and dating and travel and, fashion and all these things, your resolution then ends up being able to be something like, I'm going to do this, or like, I'm going to do more of this. And just even that alone, like it puts you out of like a negative headspace. And I think that maybe sets you up to achieve goals. But I mean, I guess, does anyone really achieve their New Year's resolutions? Like, I don't know. I'm just started mine for like the first time this year. So like, is that a thing? Do we have data that shows how many people actually say that they've achieved their resolutions? Not that maybe they could be lying.
They could be lying. And I don't think that's a very prevalent conversation around New Year's resolution parties, around even the culture scan that we did. It's not a celebration of I completed my New Year's resolution. It's what am I going to do this year? And it kind of gets to this point of like doing new things.
Oh my God. Yeah. No one talks about last year, right?
Yeah, nobody
Like,
talks about last year.
person.
Nobody talks about that I did it. Nobody talks. It's like the sense of accomplishment in New Year's resolutions isn't really there. It's only the looming sense of failure, and then the ability to either forget or forgive yourself for messing up in that certain way. And so I think one thing that was really interesting from the digging that our strategy network fellows was able to pull up for us is the idea of tiny experiments and how this is shaping goal setting. It's not so much like setting a big lofty goal or even setting a goal for a long amount of time, but it's really just seeing, can I do this? Like just starting a little test somewhere, thinking of your life like a scientist is how her name escapes me right now, but how the neuroscience who was talking about tiny experiments was really thinking about it. And I think it gets to a lot of what we were just talking about, Sonika, and gets away from the idea of goals being, I'm going to stop doing X and I'm going to start doing Y, if you will. What's built into it is this idea of less pressure. You're submitting that sense of control that's typically involved in goal setting, or that sense of like the ups and downs of really just shaping and warping your whole world around the failure. I think one aspect that was really interesting about the idea of tiny experiments was kind of framing how we look at these reset moments, like a New Year's resolution or something like that. It's the beginning of New Year. Sometimes it feels like a lot of the stuff that we did in the past is kind of just washed away. We have a blank slate. And I say blank slate both as a good and bad thing, because sometimes you feel like all the work that I put in last year is just, it's now, I have to start over. This is why people set New Year's resolutions and not celebrates the one that they've done. And it's this idea of like, within those moments of reset where things are unstable, where all the stuff that you've done is gone, it kind of leads to this idea of like, I'm just going to set a goal somewhere. It's a bit of a meme that I'm going to reference here, kind of using an anthropology license here to cite a meme. But it's the idea that if you've ever been up at 2 a.m. and made the decision, I'm going to change my life right now. I'm going to become a writer. I'm going to go to the gym. Whatever it is that you've decided at 2 a.m., like, really, the advice is go to sleep, because you should probably think about it a little more. But why do we do that? It may be because, our life is kind of coming out of control. So Sonika, I'll pause there. What are you thinking about this idea of like tiny experiments, and how can we like apply the less pressurized version, the less time bound or less long-term version of this goal setting?
I mean, I think something that I was thinking about when we were talking about this episode is just like the idea of, I know we know like SMART goals, like make them very specific, make them measurable, that you're doing it in a way. If you do that, then you're setting yourself up for success to be able to achieve them. I kind of almost feel like going into this idea of tiny experiments, it's like you change the structure by focusing the goal maybe around a mindset. To me, I feel like, and maybe to some it'd be like, oh, that's too broad. But I think there's a way to make mindset goals specific as well and frame them up to be attainable, because that way you're not saying, I'm going to do less of this or more of this, but it's just, I'm going to be thinking about things in this way, or I'm going to be thinking about things in a certain frame that I was never able to think about in a way before. And then whatever you achieve within that mindset is a win, right? It might not be exactly what you wrote down. Okay. And also we know like times change, things change. It also helps. I think a lot of times people fall off of their resolutions because they, like, for whatever reason, something wasn't able to be accomplished because of their environment. And because this was a very specific goal, to your earlier point, Gabe, it's like, well, like I can't accomplish this. And so like, I'm not even revisiting my goals at that point. How many people actually revisit their goals? So it's like, okay, I just didn't achieve it. I'm not going to be able to achieve it. Now my motivation's going down. But if it's more of a mindset frame, then you have a better chance of maybe filling or substituting like what would have been a specific goal with something else that still keeps you within that mindset. Not exactly what the tiny experiment thing is saying, but it is a replacement to that traditional goal setting and like more of a mindset goal setting.
I think one of the things that comes to my mind, and I was having a conversation with the team about this pretty recently. It's the idea that it's like what you're saying, Sonika, the idea of a mindset shift and how do we commit to that. One thing that was interesting and came up in this conversation is how much we nowadays, because time and everything moves so quickly and there's no real mainstream, we love and gravitate towards the niche. But the way that we do it is so passionately and so quickly. If you've ever heard of anyone saying that they're entering any kind of era, this is what I'm referring to. It's the idea that when we disassociate from someone, it's not just like I'm done being a fan of them. They're canceled. They're done. Like, it's moving in this way that's very fluid, very dynamic, I think is the best word that kind of captures both the speed and how iterative our identities are, our goals are, how quickly we can kind of just pivot, as long as we can completely convince ourselves that we are entering a new era. If it's just buying running shoes and now you're in your running era, like that's you now. That's what you're doing. And then when you put it away and you're going to be, I'm going to be my lazy couch potato era, like, you got a couch and you got your chips and you're going to do your thing on the couch. Like that's your new era. I think that it's so fascinating, this idea of tiny experiments, because like we were talking about with failure, the idea of like forgiveness is also built in, and it's inherent. I didn't fail my runner era. It's just over now. That phase of my life, be it a month, a year, a week, 2 minutes, it's over. I think that sense of like speed and finality is something that's really interesting too.
Yeah. I mean, I think going to your point, it's like also though, I actually don't mind the whole like, era, because that is also a mindset. And there are so many things, to your point, that you can do in your runner's era. That's not like, oh, I have to run 2 miles a week. Like that doesn't, if it's just like, I want to make little choices and smaller micro actions to feed into this larger like identity as a runner. That could be, to your point, anything from, buying sneakers to like stretching more to like running whenever you get the opportunity. Like it feels more digestible. And I think, and even in our work, this translates perfectly. When you think about behavior change, that's what we do in different lenses. We're now applying it to ourselves when it comes to resolutions, but it's the same strategy. It's the same idea. How do you set yourself up for success, right? In the right way?
Yeah. And the way that it's seamlessly woven into someone's life. I think that sometimes when patients interact with these moments of reset, these transitions, a diagnosis, anything like that, we kind of have the tendency to say, okay, so how can we create this new thing for them without really keeping in mind, like, are we creating more work for this person that's in this potentially stressful time? You don't only have to engage in tiny experiments out of a point of stress, but even if you notice, like, I'm not good at playing the piano, so maybe a tiny experiment of, how can I tinker around or learn something new about music in some way? Let me see if I'm good at it. Let me just try it out. Taking it back to the patient examples, it's really this idea of like, and Sonika, I worked with you for so long. I feel like this is one of like the biggest things that I hear you repeat. I'm going to butcher it a bit, so it's not like verbatim. It's the idea that easy usually wins. People usually default to what's easy. And so as long as we're not creating more work for people, this goal setting and everything like that, our world just moves too quickly maybe for a whole New Year's resolution. It's funny because thinking about New Year's resolutions in this episode, I was going to say, like, let's have our resolution be like 12, let's do a podcast every month or something like that. But I mean, like, it's probably more accurate, and I feel better about saying, like, we're just in our podcasting era, So we released a podcast a few weeks ago. We're going to release this one pretty soon. And we got one on the pipeline. We're in our podcasting era, and that's what we're doing.
I love that. No, totally.
This was a fun episode. I'm glad we talked about New Year's resolutions in February. Honestly, one other thing from the culture scan is that the conversation around New Year's resolutions kind of dies out around the same time. They usually last about a week. 77% of people drop off, I believe, after a week. So kind of interesting to bring it back up, not to throw it in anybody's face, have you done yours, but maybe it's like, you can put that New Year's resolution away and just say, whatever era you're in right now, like, that's okay. Let's put less pressure on people and make life easier.
Yeah, totally.
I think we can wrap up the episode there. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you to the Strategy Fellows, of course, for doing some of the digging that supported the flow of this episode. Tiffany, thank you for coming on and talking about the GLP-1 report. And Sonika, thank you for everything and being a good co-host and just keeping up with all the craziness. And thank you, everyone, for listening as well. So for Breaking the Code, I'm Gabe Cummings.
And I'm Sonika Garcia. Until next time, thanks everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Breaking the Code is a podcast created by Havas's medical anthropology team. Hosted by Sonika Garcia and Gabriel Allen Cummings. Produced by Tiffany Tang. And inspired by all of you. Thank you for listening and for your continued support. If you enjoy these episodes, we would love to hear from you. Please leave a rating, subscribe, and send us a message to our mailbox at medicalanthropology@havas.com. Till next time.